All right, I'm here. It's not pretty. This hair has not been addended or amended, and my eyes are bloodshot. My face is swollen from allergies. It's been a bad allergy day. It is hot as the blazes. I am sweating profusely. I have not taken any precautions by bringing water. I came down here with no water. So here's where we are. Y'all come on in here, get into the comment section, gently caress the like button, hammer that thing if you need to, and we're going to get into talking about some stuff wherein I alienate everybody all at one time. What's up, Daniel? So I am hot. I'm sweaty. I'm wearing a shirt that, let me get rid of this banner. Hold on. I think I've worn this before. No one knows what it means. I think somebody looked it up, and it's like some college or high school in Oklahoma or something, the Neosho way. I got it at Goodwill or something like that, where I get most of my clothing. I'm not advertising for whatever the Neosho way, and if it's something like really, really horrible, I apologize. So here we are. Y'all come in, hit the like button. If you have questions or comments, go ahead and hit the comment section, type them in there. Be glad to talk to you guys. Hello, Scott from hot coastal Texas. It is hot in Texas right now. Who would have thought? June in Texas, and it's hot. Bill Wardogheim says we've gotten over a half inch of rain the past 2 days. Well, hello, Danielle. Glad to have you here. Hello from Kentucky, Dave. Live from Santa Ana, this is the Bunker Nation. Hey, by the way, everybody, this is the Bunker Nation. My name is Michael Bunker, and I'm going to be your host for the evening. In case you haven't seen it before, I wanted you to see this. Because this is the Bunker Nation, and you should see that. Danielle says be right back. So, like I said, it's hot, it's humid. There's a lot of angst in the air. There's a lot of nervousness in the air. A lot of things going on out there in the world. I'm going to comment on some of them, and I'm going to piss a whole lot of people off because they don't have the capacity for abstract thought. They don't have the capacity to actually hold two thoughts in tension because they're not contradictory. They don't violate the law of non-contradiction. So everything's a package now. So if you want to have an opinion, it's got to fit the package of whatever your side of the political divide you're on. And it's a whole package. You got to take all of it. And if you want to say something, you got to have these words. You got to get them right. You know? And if you're on the other side, you got words you got to say. You got to say things just right. If you say one thing, oh man, you're going to get it. And so that's where we are. Those of you who know me know that I don't fall into these categories of the bifurcation of the dialectic, where people decide, okay, you have to think of everything exactly like us. They say it's impossible to go, the murder of George Floyd was wrong. It is evidence of systemic problems with law enforcement in America that need to be addressed. And at the same time, anybody who burns or destroys someone else's property is a criminal and should be arrested and prosecuted to the extent of the law. Somehow those thoughts can't fit into the same brain because the brains are too small. And I've been saying this all along. But what happens when you get trained into whatever your political party's propaganda talking points are, is that someone just comes out and says something very, I said two very, very simple and plain things today. Number one, inarguable, unless you are a part of a minuscule number of Americans who are so privileged that they weren't able to experience the life that normal Americans experience. Number one, if you took the net amount of minutes that you've experienced in fear, most Americans have been in fear of cops for more minutes than they've been in fear of looters. Now, that's an absolute fact, inarguable. And so the mind starts working, and the justification starts working, and the anecdotal fallacies start working. Look up anecdotal fallacies. I'll try to link to it below because I did a whole video on it. And people will say, well, personally, I've never been afraid of the cops. Of course not. Because you had a Z28 and your parents had money. And you were driving around at 100 miles an hour, and you knew that if you got caught or if something bad happened, somebody was going to get you out of it. You weren't going to go to prison. You weren't going to lose your livelihood. Your children weren't going to go hungry. We'll get back to that. The fact that there are people, and immediately when I say privilege, the same thing machine starts working back there, and like, he's talking about white privilege. I didn't say white. Didn't say it at all. I'm saying it's an inarguable fact that some people do not experience fear of the police because their parents or their family or somebody has money. Your fear of the police is directly related to how much money you have. Hello, Missouri. And if you don't think that's true, it's because you are completely separated from reality. I'm going to tell you some stories during this show. Some of them are very personal. If you say what you feel, your career will be ruined. Yep. Drew Brees is proof. A lot of people are proof. I think it's possible to be completely and utterly anti-rioting and looting and completely and utterly against abuse of authority. State-sponsored murder. I'm against thugs, whether they wear badges or whether or not they wear, Antifa clothing. I'm against thuggery. Hey, buddy. So let me tell you some stories. So perhaps, and it's not your fault, perhaps you've been separated mentally, physically, morally, spiritually from the experience of the rest of the world. It's not your fault. Perhaps you were born with a silver foot in your mouth. And you got a car for graduation and you were able to go do what you want. And you didn't worry about things and you went and partied and you had fun and everything was great. Then you went out into the world and you followed all the rules and everybody played along. And you always had a car that was less than 5 years old and never had a bad taillight. And you could always pay your registration. And you never had to make a decision between whether or not you were going to feed your family or whether you were going to pay for some certification or some licensure that's unconstitutional, but you're being forced to pay, but you can't afford. You've never been there, so you don't know. Welcome to privilege. It's not white privilege. It's not black privilege. It's just privilege because you never had to deal with it. But let me tell you a little secret. A whole lot of Americans, in fact, most of them, have spent some portion of their life where they didn't know where their next meal was coming from, or they didn't know how much money they were going to have, and they really couldn't afford to fix a broken taillight, and so they drove with it broken, knowing that it was possible they were going to get pulled over, it's possible they were going to get harassed, it's possible they were going to have any number of tickets written, including more than just for the taillight, and they may end up with an $800 or $1,000 bill that they can't pay. And then now they got to sit at home and go, am I going to pay for the light bill? Am I going to pay for the gas bill? Or am I going to pay this ticket that some overanxious Barney Fife wrote because that's what he needed in order to finance the police state that we all live in? Perhaps you don't know about that because you haven't experienced it. Because if you're driving around in a 2017, 2019, 2020 Ford F-150 or a brand new Lexus, you don't get pulled over. If you can afford it and you have the credit rating, you can go and you can get a 5-year everything covered warranty. And as soon as something breaks, you just pull it into the line at the dealership and you get it fixed. And you don't drive around in fear that somehow something's going to happen that you can't control, even though you're a law-abiding person, even though you try to do the right thing. Something's going to happen and you're going to get handed a bill by a civil servant whose job it is to make sure that the taxes are paid on this system that's corrupt. And you are now going to have to decide what you're going to spend money on. Let me give you a very personal story, and I've got a lot of them, and I can't even get to all of them. 2008 or so, driving in Coleman, Texas, right down here. Got pulled over because the registration on the vehicle had expired. Why had I not paid for the registration? Because I didn't have any money. The difference between me and most of the people I'm representing or talking for today is that I was poor on purpose. I was poor on purpose, which means I chose to live a life with less money. I made decisions all along the line that gave me less money because that's how I wanted to live, to show people that it was possible to provide for yourself, to grow your own food, to do all these things. And so I had zero excess cash. I decided to sacrifice myself so that I could show people day by day through social media and all of these things that it was possible to move off grid, to grow your own food, to not be subjected to the system. And guess what? I got pulled over because my registration had expired and I could not afford to have it renewed. It's too expensive. Now, do you want to get an argument about whether or not registration is important, vital, emergent, or even constitutional? Because you'll lose, because it's none of those things. But the state has decided that registration of a vehicle, making sure that the state maintains ownership of the vehicle, is important, and that we all validate their ownership of the vehicle every year or every 2 years by paying a stipend to the state to drive our own vehicle. So here I am driving down the road. I get pulled over. Barney Fife pulls over. He's not a good person. He doesn't go, "Hey, man, what's going on in your life that you let this expire? Explain to me what's going on." He wrote me 3 tickets. Other problems he found with the vehicle. I think I might have been going 3 miles over the speed limit. All together, the bill was $819. I got a bill from the state because I couldn't afford. I got a bill for being poor. They said, "Oh, you can't afford to re-register your car, and we found these other things wrong, and we need this money in order to self-sustain. Here's a bill for $819. And so here's the thing. I went ahead and paid it. Sacrificed, robbed from my family, robbed from here, robbed from there, got up the money and paid the bill. Paid my debt to society. The entire foundation of Western civilization is that once you are found wronged by the society, you pay your debt. And once you pay your debt, you're clear. You're absolutely clear. That's a foundation of Western civilization. But was I clear? No, because I paid the bill. I got a receipt saying that I was out from under it, that I was clear, that I had paid my debt to society. Society and I were equal, according to the whole principle of American jurisprudence, where you can't double jeopardy, where you can't be tried again and charged again and penalized again for the same crime. I got a letter in the mail from the state of Texas. And the state of Texas said, "Hey, we passed a law Guess what? You're going to laugh. If you have been found guilty of a moving violation or whatever, we get to just charge you whatever we want after you've already paid your debt to society, yourself constitutionally. We're going to charge you $3,000. And guess what? We're not going to call it a fine. We're not even going to call it a fee. We're going to call it a surcharge. It's a surcharge because we have determined that your lawless behavior has endangered children. So what we're going to do is we're going to take your $3,000 and we're going to give it to children's hospitals, right? Money never went to children's hospitals. They stole the money as soon as it hit the bank. It was unconstitutional. It was morally corrupt. It was absolutely wrong. They knew that the people who were most likely to receive tickets under this surcharge were people who were poor and couldn't afford to pay them. 1.3 million Texans lost their driver's licenses under this unconstitutional surcharge. And get this, they knew it was unconstitutional. They knew it would not stand up to a court charge, and they left it in, and they left it in, and they left it in, even though every expert in the world said it's unconstitutional. And as soon as it started working its way through the courts, and it got to the point where they knew they were not only going to have it removed, but they were going to have to go back and pay back all this money they stole, they said, oh, we're getting rid of it. You guys are clear. I got a letter from the state last year from 2008, 12 years. And they said, hey, you don't owe us anything. Everything's clear. Go down and get your driver's license. Don't worry about it. But that's not the end of the story. That's the beginning of the story. Let me tell you about 12 years of not having a driver's license for 1.3 million people who didn't have any money, who weren't able to get out from under it, who couldn't afford the surcharge, who had to get in their vehicle every day knowing that they were violating the law because they needed to go make money. They needed to be able to pay their bills. They needed to be able to provide for their family. The story of a woman in South Texas who got a ticket that she should have never been written, got a surcharge of thousands of dollars applied to it, lost her driver's license because she couldn't afford to pay the surcharge, drove anyway because she was a single mother and had to continue to feed her child, continued to get tickets because she would get pulled over because the registration was gone on her car, and continued to pile up bills, paid thousands and thousands of dollars in bills, to only have the state show up later and go, you know what? Everything we did was unconstitutional. We're sorry, but you're not getting any of the money back. So if you're out there and you say, I've never been scared of the cops, well, go screw yourself. Sorry, because you've lived a life where you didn't have to be on the wrong side of the law. Doesn't mean I don't love you. Doesn't mean we're not friends. Doesn't mean we can't hang out and have a beer. It means you should go screw yourself. That's just the way it goes. I'm sorry my wife's watching this. Because a lot of Americans out there live their lives every day a little bit short of the law because they can't afford it. Because the law is doing things they are not permitted to do according to the Constitution. Because the law has grown so much that it has to finance itself. And so you have cops sitting out there in $28,000, $30,000 vehicles next to highway signs waiting for you to do something wrong, even if you're a law-abiding citizen, because you didn't see something or because you made a mistake. And they don't pull up and go, hey, what's the problem? Are you okay? Are you under some stress? They go, here, pay this bill. You just got surcharged. You just got tax raised. And most Americans have spent more of their minutes of their life afraid of that than they are afraid of looting. If you don't agree with that, you are part of the problem. Now, let me give you a history lesson. Who wants a history lesson? Raise your hands if you want a history lesson. One of the greatest systems of government, one of the greatest advocates of freedom in the history of the world, despite the fact that there was slavery, although it was not based on race and it was not based on man stealing, was the Russian Empire. The Russian Empire provided more freedom and more ability for poor people and for people of every walk of life to live a moderately acceptable life than anybody in history prior to the rise of America. And guess what? As the system developed, it became more and more corrupt. More and more of the law enforcement agents, more and more of the people in charge of the czar's police and the czar became abusive of their power. And what they could have done, they could have read the tea leaves and they could have said, listen, if we don't address these grievances, we are screwed. As a nation, as a people, 30 to 100 million people are going to die because we're too arrogant to see that the system has become abusive. The system has become abusive of the poor, abusive of the needy, abusive of minorities, abusive of those who don't wield the reins of power. This happened in Russia, in France, in England, in Japan, all over the world. Every successful republic, every successful nation, as it grows, it increases its policing power, it increases its abusive power over the people. And when the time comes, there's a message that goes out and says, hey, you can redress these grievances and we can all continue on and we can all live in a land of plenty. Or you can be stupid. You can follow your political party. You can sit there and lick boots and think that because rioting is wrong and looting is wrong, murdering innocent people is okay. You can couch all your language in all of these catchphrases saying, oh, well, you know, if it happened. Now, I'm not out here saying people ought to get out in the streets and protest. I'm not saying people ought to get out there and burn and loot. I'm against burning and looting. I'm not against protesting, clearly. Protesting is why we are here. It's why we're Americans. I'm saying if you don't have the simple decency to know that most Americans are afraid of the police, most Americans are afraid of their government, most Americans believe that that guy was murdered by those cops. And you're going to be so stupid that you're going to sit back there and go, some cops are good. Of course they are. Of course they are. I have friends that are police officers. Of course they are. Some protesters are good. Some preppers are good. Some ice cream salesmen are good. The difference is ice cream salesmen don't get to just kill you and get away with it. Doesn't mean looting is okay. Doesn't mean burning buildings is okay. Are you so stupid that you can't hold two thoughts that are not contradictory at the same time? That's the problem, is that your political parties are forcing you to believe something that is absurd. It is absurd to believe that most Americans are not afraid of the police. That is absurd, and you only believe that because of your privilege. If you have never pulled out onto a highway and been afraid that something was going to happen, and if you got pulled over and even with a minor ticket, you couldn't pay your rent, sorry, you don't understand America. America is about the redress of grievances. These are legitimate grievances. Arrest looters, arrest pyromaniacs, arrest people that are busting skulls, arrest people who are gathered together in terrorist organizations, but at the same time, put these cops in jail. And secondly, let's send them all a message. You are not exempt. There is no qualified exemption. If you kill somebody while they're restrained and we catch you doing it, you're going to go to prison, and your brothers better clean that shit up. These are legitimate grievances, and you have the opportunity to go a different route than Russia went. Russia doubled down prior to 1917, and we got the communist revolution. That's where you're headed. That's where you're going. If you don't think about what you're doing, if people don't stop getting out of this same think bootlicking attitude that because your political party hates rioters and hates looting, that somehow you now have to be in the camp with crooked cops and with an entire system that perpetrates this type of inequality on poor people. It was amazing to me how many people commenting didn't understand that poor people get the majority of the tickets in America. Did you know that? You don't get pulled over when you're driving a nice Mercedes unless you're swerving or you're speeding or you're doing something. I have experienced this firsthand. My wife and I have a 2011 Taurus, which is very nice. It looks like it fits in. Very nice car. It's 9 years old, but it looks good. We have a 2003 Taurus, which is a beater, which you have to put the windows down because the air conditioner doesn't blow and every fender on it is dented in and the headlight is broke and all this other kind of stuff. Which one do you think that I'm more scared to drive? Which one am I most likely going to be pulled over driving? And don't tell me it's for my safety or the safety of the public. If you believe that, you know zero about the history of automotive travel. It's a taxation scheme that is focused mainly on the poor because the poor don't hire lawyers, the poor don't fight traffic tickets, the poor don't get people fired. I don't care who you are. It is time that you are going to make a decision. We are going to go down the road of Russia and end up with the Soviet Union, or you're going to make some kind of departure and you're going to realize if we only get rid of the bad apples and we get rid of a bad system that's not working, it's time for all of you. And I know some of you out there are public officials. I know some of you out there are city council people and all this other kind of stuff. It's time for you to start realizing just because you can pass a law doesn't make it constitutional. Just because a law exists doesn't make it right. You have the right and you have the ability to stand against it in a position of authority. That surcharge law in Texas was unconstitutional on its face. It was not only corrupt and it was immoral. I can tell you this. It was an absolute obscene offense against God. And God's involved. To come to people who have paid the Lord says that he loves those of a contrite heart. Those who have paid their due. Who have said, I'm guilty, and they've paid their ticket and they've paid whatever it is, or they've done their time in jail, and to come to them after that and say, know what? We're going to drain your account for years to come. The surcharge was not a one-time charge. They charged you every year for 3 years. We're going to drain your bank account for years because we can. It was unbiblical. It was unconstitutional, and it was wrong. And your obligation, where you'd ever run into something like that, is to say no. And guess what I did? I said no. The minute I read it, I said, I will never pay it. My children are on here. My wife's on here. Tell the truth. I will never pay it. I don't care what they do to me. I will never, ever pay that surcharge. I will drive without a driver's license. I will not be able to pay taxes. I will not be able to get a passport. I will not travel overseas. I will be scared every time I drive in public. I will be scared to go see my grandchildren born. I'll be scared to go to a funeral if somebody I know's died. All of these things because that is wrong, and I refuse to pay it. And I got the letter where the state said, "Hey, you don't have to pay it." Well, no shit. I didn't have to pay it. My lights went out. My fan went out. I apologize for my language. I apologize to my wife because I've absolutely broken my promise not to say bad words on the show. I'm offended by people out there who think that somehow because you have never been afraid of the cops, that that's not a universal emotion because you don't know it. I am human. I'm sorry I cursed. I got to go, y'all. Appreciate you guys watching, and you guys have a good night. I'll see you tomorrow.